Welcome back, everybody, to another week of Sunday School here at the Lighthouse Church of the Nazarene in Moravia, Iowa, where we're going through the book of John. We're actually in the middle of John chapter 4. John chapter 4 is the woman at the well, also known as the Samaritan woman. Jesus showed up at this well. A Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink of water." They went back and forth. Jesus says, "I can give you living water in which you'll never thirst again." And she's like, "Give me this water." Jesus says to her, "Go get your husband and come back." She says, "I have no husband." Jesus says, "You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're with right now isn't even your husband." In that, she changes the subject, finally gets to the point like, "I know that the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he's going to tell us everything." And Jesus says, "I who speak to you am he." Jesus says, "I'm the long awaited one. I am the one who was prophesied of old that everybody has been looking for." So that's what was going on. We left off in verse 26. We're going to pick up right in the middle of the chapter. So let's get out our Bibles. Let's follow along. John chapter 4, verse 27. At this point, his disciples came, and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" If you remember, the disciples left Jesus and went into the city to buy food. And when they come back, they see Jesus talking with this woman. And they're all saying to themselves, "Why is Jesus talking to a woman?" Well, we think about it, nobody back then would have talked to a woman. But Jesus went beyond the customs and traditions of the time. And what did they also do? They also didn't question Jesus. It says that right there. At this point, they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" There's the lesson right there. You don't question Jesus. Let's keep going here. Verse 28. The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men of the city, "Come, see a man who told me all that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" What is the one reason the woman came to the well? To draw water. Once she's been confronted by Jesus and talked to Jesus, what did she do? She forgets the whole reason that she came to the well. She's got more important matters now. She left her water pot there and then went and told everybody else. We could say that she's become a new creation. She has more important things to do now. The Apostle Paul said this, did he not? He said, "What things were gained to me, these I have counted lost for Christ." But we all have that too, right? We have hobbies and stuff that we focus a lot of time and attention on. And then once we find Jesus and get saved, we're like, "I have more important things to be doing than these things." One other thing that we can look at right here, John in his gospel, he's always throwing out these little details that we're only going to get by an eyewitness. If you remember when he was at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, he told us exactly how many pitchers were there and how much volume each of those pitchers held. When we're going through here, he's always giving us exact times of the day which these events took place. So we get all these eyewitness minor details that we would only get from an eyewitness like John. All right, so the woman sets down her water pot. I'll start in verse 28 again. The woman left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all the things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Think about this. What is the first thing that this woman did after being confronted by Jesus? What did she do? She went and told everybody she knew about him. Hudson Taylor, who started the China Inland Missionary and went and preached the gospel to China and took it to that country. Hudson Taylor said this. He said, "If I could emulate one person in the Bible, it would be the woman at the well." Hudson Taylor said that about just this little minor, insignificant person in the Bible. Hudson Taylor said, "If I could emulate one person in the Bible, it would be the woman at the well." Because once she heard about Jesus, she went and told everybody she knew about him. Let's think about this also. Where were the disciples? Where had they just come from? The disciples had went into the city to buy food. Do you think the disciples even told one person about Jesus? I'm going to guess no. But this woman, what did she do? She went and told the whole city about this. I like to think of it like this. This woman was not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Paul says this in Romans 1:16. "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to everyone who believes." Jesus said this. He said, "Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed." So verse 30. So the woman sets her water pot, goes into the city, tells everybody she knows about him. Verse 30. Then they went out of the city and came to him. Can one person make a difference? Think about it. Can one person make a difference? Absolutely. Jonah reluctantly went and preached an 8-word sermon to the city of Nineveh, and the whole city repented. He preached an 8-word sermon, yet 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Jonah preached an 8-word sermon to Nineveh, and the whole city repented. This woman right here, one woman, what goes into town, tells everybody she knows about him, and the whole town comes out to meet Jesus. So we can think about it like this. The greatest witness that we can have is a changed life and enthusiasm for the gospel. When people see that in our own lives, the gospel will spread like fire. So, verse 32, or verse 31. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But Jesus said to them, I have food to eat of which you do not know. Therefore the disciples said to one another, Has anyone brought him anything to eat? This is now, I think, the third time in John's gospel where Jesus is talking about heavenly matters, spiritual matters, and the people he's talking to think that he's talking about earthly matters. If you remember in the 3rd chapter when he was talking to Nicodemus, Jesus said, if one has to be born again, if he's going to enter the kingdom of heaven. And Nicodemus says, how can a man be born when he is old? I'm too big to fit through a birth canal. When the woman at the well comes, he's like, hey, I can give you living water. And she's like, that's great, because I have to come to this well a lot and I don't really want to get any more water. But Jesus is talking about something else. Same thing here. His disciples think that he's talking about earthly food, like, Jesus, you got to be hungry, eat. Jesus says, I have food to eat of which you do not know. And they're like, well, who brought food for him? Where did he get this? The Apostle Paul says this. It's Colossians 3:2. He says, set your mind on things above, not the things of the earth. We get so earthly minded sometimes, but we got to keep our focus on things that are above. Verse 34, Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. There's nothing more satisfying than doing the work of God. That's what Jesus is saying right here. Psalm 40 verse 8 says this, says, I delight to do thy will. What is it that the disciples care about right now? Their bellies. They care about food. But what did Jesus say when he was hungry? Remember when he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and then he was tempted by Satan? Satan said, hey, turn these stones to bread. What did Jesus say? Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word which proceedeth from the mouth of God. We think that we would be happy and content if we got everything we ever wanted in life. But that is so not true, because our food should be to do the will of God. That's what will bring us sustenance. So, verse 35, Jesus is saying, do you not say that there are still 4 months, and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life, so that both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I have sent you to reap that for which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors. Jesus is saying that sharing your faith is kind of like farming, is it not? Do you remember the parable of the sowers in Matthew chapter 13, where Jesus says, a sower went out to sow. Some seed fell by the wayside, where it was trampled and devoured by the birds of the air. And some seed fell on rock, where it sprang up quickly. But when the sun came out, it withered away because it lacked moisture. And some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up with it and choked it out. But some seed fell on good ground, sprang up and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60-fold. That's what Jesus said. So Jesus is comparing sharing our faith to farming. Jesus is also telling us here that there's an urgency. He says, you think there's still 4 months and then comes a harvest. He says, lift up your eyes and look at the field. The harvest is right now. 2 Corinthians 6:2 says this. It says, now is the accepted time. Today is the day of salvation. But what is the problem also in the harvest of the souls? Jesus told us this. It's in Matthew chapter 9. He says, the harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. So that's where we go out with Jesus right here. He's comparing it to farming, sharing your faith. He says the harvest time is right now. We need to remember this too. There's no competition in the Lord's harvest. We all have one job to do, and we all have our assigned task for it. However, there is no place for lazy people in God's kingdom, because he says the laborers are few and there's a lot of work to get done. Verse 39, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the words of the woman who testified, he told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 more days. Then many more believed in him because of his own word. Isn't it great when one's faith becomes their own faith, when it's no longer the faith of your parents, your grandparents, but when you become a believer for yourself? That's the way these people of Samaria were right there. They said, now we believe him, not just because of what you said, but we ourselves, we have heard him. This, I always like this story in the Bible. It's in Acts chapter 19 about the 7 sons of Sceva. Do you remember them when they tried casting out demons in the Jesus that Paul preaches? And the demon says, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you? And he jumped on them, and the 7 sons of Sceva had to run away naked. You see, it wasn't their faith, it was the faith of someone else. That's the way these people are from the city here. It's no longer the woman at the well's faith, it's their own faith. Let's keep going here. Verse 43. Now after 2 days, he departed from there and went to Galilee. So he stayed there 2 more days because the people asked him to. We find this a lot in John's gospel, actually. Remember, he started in Jerusalem, then he went to Galilee at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, then he went back to Jerusalem. You remember where he drove the people out with the temple. Now he's went through Samaria, and now he's back up in Galilee again. So he's been moving. So he just moved, or he's going to move from Samaria back up to Galilee. And then guess what? At the beginning of John chapter 5, he's going to be right back down in Jerusalem. So verse 43. Now after 2 days, he departed from there and went to Galilee. Verse 44. For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. That's an interesting verse, isn't it, there? That a prophet has no honor in his own country. Jesus actually said this a couple times. One time when Jesus was in his very own town, it says, who is this? This is the carpenter's son. We know his brothers and sisters. We know his mom and dad. And Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country. But think about it like this. Who was Jesus sent to? His own people, the Jews. And what did they do? They rejected him. But Jesus had a bigger mission. Remember, this actually starts to hint at God's mission to expand the church to the whole world. When we get to the book of Acts, Jesus says, you will be my witness in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And that's how it happened here. But why is a prophet not without honor in his own country? Because the people become too familiar with him. We can do that too and just get too familiar with Christianity and just another day to go to church. We get too familiar and comfortable with it. And that's the way they can be. Verse 45. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. So all these people that are up in Galilee, they had been down at Jerusalem for that Passover feast and seen the things that he did down there. And they're now back up in Galilee. Verse 46. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea and into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Many times in the Bible, we see people coming to Jesus on behalf of their sick children. The Syrophoenician woman did it. Jairus did it. And this tells we all know this, but when your child is suffering, you're desperate. You'll do anything, will you not? And it's truly hard to feel joy in your life if your children are suffering. But think about it like this. It's tough to have joy in your life when your children are suffering. It's because you love your children so much and only want the best for them. Jesus says this. He says, you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children. How much more will the Heavenly Father give good things to those who ask him? However much we love our children, God loves us that much more, is what we tell us there. So this man, he's coming to Jesus on behalf of his child because his child's at the point of death. Verse 48, Jesus said to him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. The nobleman said to him, sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus said to him, go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word which Jesus spoke, and he went his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him, saying, your son lives. Then he inquired them of the hour which he had gotten better. And they said to him, yesterday, at the 7th hour, his fever left him. Let's think about this again. The distance from Capernaum to Galilee was 20 miles. That was the distance from this man who came to see Jesus to ask him on behalf of his son The distance was 20 miles. Now, what time did his child get healed? It says right here, they said yesterday at the 7th hour. What's the 7th hour? Well, the woman at the well came at the 6th hour, and we say that was straight up noon. So it was yesterday at the 7th hour. Yesterday at 1 p.m. is when this man came to Jesus and asked for healing for his children or for his child. But when did he go home? He didn't even go home till the next day. What does this tell us actually? What this tells me is that this man had great faith and he didn't even rush home to see if what Jesus told him was true. He just took him at his word. Did he not? Do you agree with me? I think that's actually great. This man came from Capernaum to Galilee just to ask Jesus about his child. When Jesus told him that his child was healed, he goes, great, thanks. I think I'll hang out here the rest of the day and then go home tomorrow. He took Jesus at his word. We can also take God at his word. Everything he says in this Bible is true. We can take him at his word. Let's keep going here. Verse 53. So the father knew it was at the same hour in which Jesus had said to him, your son lives. And he himself believed, and his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea and into Galilee. Now, Jesus has actually by now done a lot more signs than this. It says there's a second one when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. It's probably only the second sign that he's done up in Galilee so far. But we know he's done more than this because Nicodemus told him, said, hey, we know you're from God because no one could do these signs that you do unless someone was with them. So Jesus has already done a lot more miracles that we don't get to read about in the Bible, but we know he's done more. And it's interesting, at the end of the book of John, John says this. He says, there are many more things which Jesus did, which are not written in this book. But if they were written, the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. All right, so Jesus just got done talking to the woman at the well. He heals the nobleman's son right here. Next week, we're going to be back down in Jerusalem, and we're going to be in the pool of Bethesda. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Bye.